When Senate Democrats are attempting to resurrect a long rejected idea associated with slavery in the early days of the United States.
That question has been raised in the state of Oregon, and the conclusion is that the president overstepped when he sent the National Guard into Oregon and tried to federalize them in that situation.
And they are under final orders of deportation. So what I understand our Democratic colleagues to be saying is not only can local and state officials nullify federal law 4 different times since June, resulting in the death of even some of the detainees that they purport to be defending.
In today's heated Senate exchange, Senator John Cornyn accused Democrats of trying to resurrect nullification, comparing the resistance to federal immigration enforcement to pre-Civil War states' rights arguments used to defend slavery. Cornyn said local and state officials, like those in Illinois and Chicago, are wrongly refusing to cooperate with ICE and federal law enforcement, violating the Constitution's Supremacy Clause. He argued that President Trump is simply enforcing immigration law and fulfilling the mandate voters gave him to restore order at the border.
Senator Cornyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Imagine my surprise when Senate Democrats are attempting to resurrect a long rejected idea associated with slavery in the early days of the United States of America, that state and local officials can nullify federal law. That's what the governor of Illinois, that's what the mayor of Chicago is advocating, that somehow state and local laws and the decisions made by state and local law enforcement nullify federal law enforcement efforts. It is, I think it's an indication of how desperate they become to try to justify the violence that's been directed toward ICE agents seeking to enforce our immigration laws, and the National Guard that's been deployed by the state of Texas, for example, to help protect the citizens of Illinois and protect federal property and protect and enforce federal law. So I know the ranking member said he didn't hear any justification for the use of this, but every high school civics student knows, I would hope, that under the Constitution, Article 6, federal law is the law of the land. And that is what these federal officers are doing, being deployed to places around the country like Chicago, where local and state officials simply refuse to provide for protection of federal law enforcement officers enforcing federal law. It is, I'm shocked that they would want to be associated with a doctrine of nullification that was first advocated by the states' rights advocates back in the run-up to the Civil War on behalf of protecting the institution of slavery. It is it obviously demonstrates that something else is going on here, because I know all of the members of this committee certainly know at least as much as a high school civics student knows about the supremacy of federal law under the United States Constitution. So something else must be at play here. And while they say, well, their reaction to all this isn't because they hate President Trump, it also seems to me to be a rejection not only of federal law and the constitutional authority given to the to federal authorities to enforce that law, but also a repudiation and a rejection of the election of President Trump, who was elected in large part on the basis that the Biden administration had opened the borders of the United States to untold numbers of individuals, some of whom came here for reasons we all understand, for a better life. Others came here to commit crimes and attack and assault and kill even American citizens, like Laken Riley, And we've seen the flood of illegal drugs coming across the border as a result of these policies. And now President Trump is trying to fulfill his mandate given on November the 5th last year to clean up the mess created by the Biden administration's lawless policies, including the repatriation or deportation of roughly 282,000 individuals who have final orders of deportation. There's no question of due process there. They've had their process, and they are under final orders of deportation. So what I understand our Democratic colleagues to be saying is not only can local and state officials nullify federal law, but they can also reject the mandate of the voters who elected this president based on his promise to enforce federal law, unlike the previous administration. So I thought the Attorney General was quite clear when she said the Constitution is the law of the land. Federal law needs to be enforced by federal officials wherever there is an effort to break federal law or to destroy federal property. So I think the authority is absolutely crystal clear. And you have to wonder, based on the fact that members of this committee are smart, knowledgeable individuals, certainly who understand the Constitution and the role of the Supremacy Clause under the federal Constitution, that there must be something else at play here. And I suggest it's just politics and an effort to appease their radical base who doesn't believe that we ought to enforce the law, including our immigration laws, and that it's okay to attack federal law enforcement officials like Immigration and Customs Enforcement when they are enforcing federal law, as has happened in Texas 4 different times since June, resulting in the death of even some of the detainees that they purport to be defending. So I think it's clear that there's something else at play here. Everybody can reach their own conclusion, but it certainly isn't any basis in law that would allow local and state officials to nullify federal law and the enforcement efforts by federal law enforcement officials. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Durbin and Senator Schiff. Go ahead, Senator Durbin.
Mr. Chairman, a president is limited by the Constitution and the law. The fact that he is the supreme voice in the land under the Constitution does not give him the authority to do things without legal authorization. That question has been raised in the state of Oregon, and the conclusion is that the president overstepped when he sent the National Guard into Oregon and tried to federalize them in that situation. It takes more than a tweet, more than a press conference, more than a rally. It takes the law to authorize the president to do these things. That is being tested in the courts in Illinois even today. Let me also say that I attempted to ask that basic question, the legal authority of the president to federalize the National Guard and send them into the state without the approval of the governor, and she refused to answer. That's when she said, I must hate Donald Trump to ask such a question. It's not a hate or love situation. It's just a question of the law, and still is. The point I want to make as well is that there is a false narrative here that this is all about the litany. You remember the litany? You heard it many times. Murderers, rapists, terrorists, people engaged in sexual predatory crimes, basically those who are involved in the most heinous crimes were coming into this country and needed to be stopped. And that supposedly is what we're stopping now. Tuesday, September 30th, this group in Chicago decided to assault a building in the middle of the night, 2200 block of South Shore Drive. Some 43 people were rousted out of bed. They broke down their doors, brought their children out with the ties on their hands, and held them for interrogation. They did not know in advance who was in there, nor suspect any particular individuals, no information on that score. It's the kind of outrageous conduct by this force, wherever they're inspiration may be, that has turned a lot of people against the supposed effort by the president to make Chicago safer. And I might add, business leaders have asked that the National Guard not be sent into our state. It's going to hurt business, it's going to hurt tourism, and it's totally, totally unnecessary. So this isn't a question of civil wars and Reconstruction and the Constitution. It's the question is whether we're a nation of laws. Today, the court in Chicago will make that decision. I hope they rule as the court in Oregon did. I yield.
Senator Schiff.
I think